I'm going to run through the accounting features on wolfadmin.com. To view financial reports, I'm going to go to Reports over here and then Financial Reports. You can select any date range to view financial figures for, and it'll give you options to jump between months and years. For purposes of this demonstration, I'm going to view for all time. It gives you financial figures, income statement, balance sheet, trial balance, and your VAT control statement. If you're not tax or VAT registered, some of these options will of course disappear. The financial figures tab over here gives you figures in a sort of financial account looking format, but it also gives you links you can click so that you can see the details of certain items. And some items will have little pop-outs explaining how we got to those figures. So if I click on debtors, customers for example, it can show me all the customers that owe money and how it got to that figure. And if I click sales total, it'll take me to the general ledger where it shows all invoices and credit notes. Again, pointing out how it got to that figure, and it'll filter it by the same date range you filtered this page by. This business is set up in rands for South Africa, but in your company settings you can change the currency, the tax percentage, and the tax label. So in South Africa we call it VAT, for example. You'll be able to view this page for reports without actually using the accounting functionality of WolfAdmin. But if you want to make full use, one of the things you'll need to do is upload bank statements. The first time you do this, it'll ask you to add a bank account. So we'll start by entering the bank's name. If it's a regular bank account, like a check account, current account, it'll be an assets account. If it's generally something you'll owe on, like a credit card, then you'll select liabilities. And if you're moving over to WolfAdmin from another system and you need to configure an opening balance to start on WolfAdmin from a particular date, you can configure it over here. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to add the bank account. Now we can upload a CSV file that we've downloaded from the bank. It will show you a preview and it'll point out if there are any issues, like if there are no overlapping transactions that might indicate they're missing transactions. It will show you a warning here. I'm going to go ahead and import. Now we can do some allocations. There are some built-in rules to automatically allocate, and you can create your own rules. So for example, the VoIP contract over here, we can, if it's a once-off, manually allocate it to where it should be under, say, telephone and mobile. But you can also create rules. It'll be easier later. There'll be a feature to create rules over here. But for now, if I just go to financial accounts and I go to telephone and mobile, I can add VoIP contract as a keyword here in the way that it appears on the bank statement. Now if I go back to the bank page, it will show me the option to allocate it to the default based on the keywords, and next bank statement we upload, it will automatically allocate that to telephone and mobile. Supplier payments to supplier invoices. Currently it says sundry expenses. It will later automatically pick this up, but I'm just going to select that this is for a supplier, and based on that it'll automatically figure out which supplier it is, if it's for a particular supplier invoice, and allocate it. And I'm going to do the same for this one over here. It's a supplier and allocate it. For customer receipts, it searches for customers based on keywords and amounts and date ranges of amounts owed. If you've already created an invoice and said that it's an EFT invoice, it'll find the receipt that you've created and automatically allocate it to that. Or if you haven't created a receipt already, it'll show you the invoice that it tries to allocate it to. Or if they've made a part payment, it'll just figure out what customer it's for, not allocated directly to one invoice, but directly to the customer's account. And then the allocation to invoices is automatic from oldest to newest invoices. Generally, this is pretty accurate, and you can just go down the list and click on the allocations that it recommends. There are some extra actions you can perform with the drop down on the right here. You can edit a transaction if there was a problem on the CSV you imported. You can manually add transactions if they're missing. You can change the order of transactions. That's more useful if for any reason they were in the wrong order in the bank balances go in the wrong order, but that doesn't usually happen. And you can delete a row if there's a duplicate or split a transaction. So let's say Jack's salary over here, 300 of it was actually reimbursing airtime and his salary was 4,700. I can split the transaction, and I can say that one of these amounts, there was 300 coming off. And now there's 4,700 to salary and wages. And I can allocate this to telephone and mobile. And you can also make notes for future reference, for your own reference. So I can say, used his own airtime. And if a transaction has changed, there'll be little warning icons here just informing you the transaction was split or a transaction was modified. Again, just for your own reference. There are some useful search functions at the top over here, searching for keywords, for amounts, filtering by money in or money out. You can choose to search for transactions allocated to particular transaction types. Or you could even find transactions that are not allocated to something with a certain keyword, for example. So let's just say you had all those VoIP contracts allocated elsewhere and you want to change them. You could say, I want to find everything with VoIP contract that's not allocated to telephone and mobile, and search for those in a particular date range or select for all time. And when you do that, there'll also be a button at the bottom under allocate to, under the suggestions, there's this button that says set all items on this page to the default account. So that's useful for changing transaction allocations in bulk at a later stage. If you go to manage bank accounts over here, you can add as many bank accounts as you like. I'm going to go to the financial accounts page now. So here you've got your assets, equity, liabilities, income and expenses. So you can add accounts over here. You can give them keywords as they appear on the bank statement, so they allocate automatically. Allowing negative amounts, if you tick that, it means that you'll be able to allocate money coming in to this expense account. That's useful if you want to reverse transactions, but it's disabled by default because when you're allocating things, you generally don't want to see all your expense accounts listed when money's coming in. You can also set sub-accounts to get reporting on different types of sales, for example. So I'll add a new income account here. If you have a parent account sales, so you have sub-accounts under the sales. So I want to split off labor, for example. And once I've done that and I create invoices, I'll be able to allocate line items to general sales or to labor. So now that I've done that, for example, if I create an invoice to anyone, so I'll invoice for something over here, and then I can also invoice for setting up, for example, and I can say that is now allocated to sales/labor. I can also apply one financial account to everything in one go. So if I create this invoice now, let's just say they're paying by card. And now I go to my financial reports. So if I go reports and back to financial reports, now I can see over here a split of my labor, and credit notes, if there are any under label, will also be shown under that. I can also do the same thing for cost of sales accounts. I can split up the cost of sales into sub-accounts. If I want to figure out my profits or on a specific side of the business, for example. I'm going to go back to the bank page and just one or two other things. If you're tax registered, then you'll have this column here that says VAT. And you'll want to tick that on transactions where there was VAT included and you can claim back. Bank charges, retail expenses, those sort of things. Obviously, salaries or Your credit card income from your credit card vendor won't have VAT, because those will be separately on their charges to you and your charges to the customer, not on the amount that they're paying you. So you can go through for your VAT control statement and choose which transactions have VAT or tax. By default, the balance column is disabled, but you can enable that if you want to. Obviously, it makes sense to view from oldest to newest if you want to see a flow. If there is a problem with the flow of the balance, it will actually give you a warning and tell you how much is out. So, for example, if they're missing transactions, or for any reason there were multiple transactions on one day that somehow imported in the wrong order, the code does try to prevent that from happening. It's mostly for any transactions that might be missing. It will warn you. And there's also a recon tool over here. If I select over recon tools and say find balance issues, it will actually search for all balance issues in the history. Well, you can select any date range, of course, and it will show you any balance issues where there might be past missing transactions. Obviously, at the moment, there are none. And you can also view over here things that are unallocated. In order to get proper financial figures, everything does need to be allocated properly. So, for example, when I first imported the bank statement, I didn't allocate anything on page 2. But now I can see everything in one go that's not allocated. So this loan over here, I presumed is for a customer because there's money coming in. But I'm going to change that. That's actually the owner loans account. And then these over here, there are two amounts coming in from handyman services, and there's an older receipt and a newer receipt, receipt 44 and receipt 64. So obviously the older date will be the older receipt. It gives a little bit of a date range leniency on finding receipts to match, because there may be clearance times that are different. So someone may have paid you, you created a receipt today, but the money only clears in your account 2 days later. So I'm just going to allocate that to receipt 44, that to 66. This one I've only got one option over here, so I allocate it. And now everything is correctly allocated. So if I reload this page, search, it says that there's nothing that's left unallocated. You may also want to go through and check what is allocated to sundry expenses. So in the search over here, I can just select sundry expenses for all time. And then I can go through and see what's on sundry expenses. So here's another loan amount that we hadn't allocated. Now, what I can do is just create a keyword. So this happens automatically in future. So this owner loan, I'm actually just going to use the keyword loan because we're not going to use it for much else in this business. So if I go to financial accounts, under owner loans, I'll just add the allocation keyword loan. All right. Now I'm going to go back to bank and select everything that's sundry expenses. I'm going to select the date range as all time and search. Now over here, if there are a whole bunch of them, you could click this button at the bottom. It will show, there may be other sundry expenses that will show other default accounts for, of course. So there's only one here, but because of the keyword just picking up, it should be owner loans. If there are a bunch of them, you can just say set all items. Now let's look at the journal entries. These 3 links over here all take you to creating a journal entry. If you just say journal entry, it leaves the template blank. But these are just shortcuts to automatically take you to the edit journal page and select cash going out or cash coming in. It just saves one extra step. So let's just say that you spent money on petrol. So you can say petrol and oil on a particular date. We can select a date. I'm going to say it was on Monday, and you can put a description, you can put the garage name, and you can say you put in 150 rands petrol, and VAT, you can say yes, that is a VAT expense. So it's your standard 15% VAT in South Africa. Obviously you can adjust the amount for yourself. You can add notes for your own reference, like I could type here which employee put in petrol. So at a later stage I can go back and just have a reference of what it was for. If I'm adding multiple transactions, I can keep this window open and I can say retain the description. So, and I can retain the amount. So if I click save, it allows me to add a new transaction and just make some changes over here. So let's just say yesterday there was another 200 Rand petrol. So I'm going to click save, and now it'll save the last transaction. It'll show it to you here for reference, so you can see what you last added, so you don't do it again. And I'm going to say on the 24th, there was 200 Rands petrol. And now I'm done after this, so I can untick keep this window open and click save. Now it takes me to the detailed ledger page, which I can also access at the top here, financial and detailed ledger. Now, by default here it shows all transactions of all types. Before I forget, there is an export feature over here. So if you put in filters at the top for the types of transactions you want, and say load detailed ledger, then afterwards, or even now without doing anything, I can click the export button over here, and I can say I want to send all of my results or only what's showing on this page, what columns I want, and I can download it as a CSV or PDF or print it. There are a couple of pages on WolfAdmin where you can do that have these icons, and some have exceptions, like one of the financial reports exports to Excel instead of CSV. Now, of course, you can filter the detailed ledger by selecting a financial account, for example. Let's just say you want to see all sales. You can also sort newest to oldest. You can select a particular date range. It gives you options here. I don't know if the video records this. It gives options like yesterday, this week, last month, last 30 days, last financial year, etc. So you can quickly select a date range or choose a custom date range. Most forms with dates on WolfAdmin have this feature. You can filter by searching for description, amounts. You can look for specific contra accounts on transactions if necessary. If you're looking through sales, like invoices, right now it's grouping them. It says this invoice was all allocated to sales and it's 2 items. You can untick this box to get it to split and show each individual item on the invoice. And you can also filter by user. You could say I want to see all journal entries created by a particular user. So let's do a search, and we can search for sales. And now this searches everything that's under sales. So obviously these were the contra account was the customer, it's the invoices you've created, and credit notes. And then you can also say over here, I want to see what was for labor. Obviously, for getting figures on these, you'll rather use the financial reports page. The detailed ledger is more for searching for or exporting a list of transactions. And there are also shortcuts here. If you're viewing a particular financial account, you can quickly click here to add a debit or credit entry. That'll take you to the journal page. Obviously, that's not something you'll usually do for sales, but if you were in, say, telephone and mobile, for example, and you say, right, there was another one you want to add, you can just say add debit entry over here. And then select the contra accounts. Usually for this case it would be cash, and fill in the amounts as shown previously. Alright, let's have another look at the financial reports. So if I go over here to the financial reports, the main tab over here shows all our figures. You can choose a date range over here. Currently it's selected on this month. You can easily go between months with these buttons here. So this month you can get your total sales figures, your deferred sales figures, which aren't available on other standard financial reports. And you can also click on items to view how it got to those figures. It'll take you to the detailed ledger page and show all transactions for that date range, as I mentioned earlier. The income statement over here, there we get our net profit and loss. That exports to Excel instead of CSV. There's the balance sheet over here, which I can see balances. If it doesn't balance, you can click Balance Recon Report, and that gives you a report on anything that may cause the balance sheet not to balance. And if it finds any issues, it'll give you links to go to the bank, for example. If they're missing transactions, it'll pick them up, or unallocated receipts, for example. Then you can go through those and fix them to get your balance sheet to balance. Alright, and then you've got a trial balance over here, which you can also export to Excel, and then the VAT control statement over here. So you can see how much you owe on tax. So right now I can see I owe the taxman just over 5,000 rands. And if you do pay the taxman, of course, you will allocate it in the bank, or I presume you would not pay cash, so you wouldn't use a journal entry for that. Usually that would be in the bank transaction, you would allocate it. So if I go back to the bank, for example, and let's just say, hypothetically, this amount over here was for VAT control, so you paid SARS 4,700 rands. Now if I go back to reports, financial reports, and VAT control, it now reflects you only owe them 344 rands. There are also some extra options at the top over here. If you wanted to, you could just filter the sources for your financials from only journal entries, or you could untick journal entries and untick financial documents to exclude those transactions. Obviously your balance sheet won't balance if you do that, but if you just want to see figures that exclude those, for example, you could also show non-zero amounts, and you could say I want to view excluding VAT income expenses. So now if I reload the page over here, it'll show all the financial accounts that actually have zero amounts that match your search. Usually it hides them just to make everything a bit neater. And of course, because I unticked financial documents, which are invoices, credit notes, supplier invoices, etc., that's why it's showing the sales total as zero over here. So if I don't filter sources, if I include these, obviously it'll show those figures again. Another report I'll briefly show you, the sales reports page. So here you can see your sales per day, sales by day. It'll show for the last so many days that you selected. So if I want to choose from the 20th, or let's just say I want to see Sunday to that previous Monday, I'll actually have to choose Sunday in the prior 6 days. Then I can see my total sales and how busy each day was. I can go sales by month. This demo account, we obviously don't have much of that. And I can also see sales by customer, who are my top customers in the last 30 days. I can exclude the cash account for walk-in customers and actually compare for my actual customer accounts. There will be some more reports here added at a later stage. And now let's go to the cash up page. So this will show for each of your sales people what they've sold and their cash up status. If you're running a retail store, you'll obviously use this page at the end of every day. So the first section here, the cash account balance check. This is to make sure that when you're selling on the cash account to customers that walk into the store and they're not going to pay at a later stage, these must balance. You want to make sure that your invoices, receipts, credit notes, and refunds all balance for each salesperson for the day. If they don't, you can go to view the statement for that particular salesperson. So if I go, because this is a demo account, it doesn't select the salesperson. But over here, it does show these are all the transactions created by Bob yesterday. And I can see their transactions, and I can spot out if there are any amounts that are incorrect. So, and I can make adjustments there to get it to balance. And then I can also see how much cash they're meant to turn in for the day. If there's a variance over here, let's just say Bob only gave you 200 Rand. He doesn't know where the 8 Rand went at the end of the day. You can click log a variance, and you can say you handed in 200 Rands that was short 8. And that'll create a journal entry, which will show in your reports. And also you can get a view of a historical cash up variance for each individual salesperson. You can also view a more detailed report over here. You can say list all transactions and load the cash up. And then it shows you a more detailed report for each salesperson showing all of their transactions. And it'll also point out if there are any cancelled transactions. Obviously, you generally won't give salespeople the ability to cancel invoices and receipts, so this usually wouldn't be a problem. But you may, as an owner or manager, you might give yourself permission, and then you can see this as a reference. Or if you have a manager that might have had this permission and cancelled something, you can at least see what they've cancelled. Now if I go back to the financial reports over here, I can see that -8 coming off my income from the cash variance account. I think that sums up everything for now. This video was recorded June 2025. There will be improvements taking place as time goes on, so this video might become a little outdated and there may be extra features that make things a little bit easier as time goes forward. Thank you for watching.